George Floyd's death is reigniting national outrage over hundreds of unarmed African Americans being the target of police brutality. It comes as the African American community also disproportionately feels the impacts of the coronavirus. Dion Rabouin has been reporting on how these two issues are connected. He's the market editor for Axios and joins me now. Dion, thanks very much for being with us. In your article entitled America's Unfinished Business, you say both police brutality and the coronavirus pandemic are disproportionately impacting the Black community due to a system of abuses that have not been addressed. Explain what you mean by that, and are the two issues related?
Yeah, well, it's really three issues. It's about the economic effects or the impact of these recessions dating back to the 2008 Great Recession, and now the impacts that we're seeing with the coronavirus-induced recession. You've also got the virus itself, which disproportionately affects Black folks, in large part because of the economic conditions that we're in the U.S. And then you've also got these issues of police brutality that, again, more often than not target Black folks because we are in these communities. But there's also the separate issue of just flat-out racism. We've seen time and time again through surveys, social science studies, things like that, that Black folks are disproportionately disadvantaged by, having Black-sounding names, by attending Black colleges, by, just basically you show up to the interview, and if you are a Black person, you are less likely to get a job, less likely to get a promotion, things like that. The same thing exists with police brutality, with, the police more often than not targeting Black people for suspecting them of crimes, shooting them, killing them. We've all seen that Black folks are more likely to experience these things at the hands of police. So these all kind of come together in the sense of the economic issues that's putting Black people in harm's way in a lot of these cases. And now we are just suffering from all three of these: the virus, the economic impact of the recession, and also now we're seeing police brutality get mixed in with that.
Can you talk more about the effects of the recession and how that is impacting what we're seeing with the pandemic right now?
Yeah, the effects of the recession in 2008 really were just starting to be recovered in the Black community. Among poor folks in general, the sort of lower economic quintiles of the economic labor force, and that particularly affected Black people who had less wealth before the recession, and then after the recession happened, had that wealth generally wiped out to the point where Black folks in the U.S. really had negative net wealth. Most Black folks' wealth was tied up in their homes. Black people, because they were denied housing through years of redlining, through years of segregation, through years of banks just denying them loans, when they did have the opportunity to purchase homes, put all their money into homes. And so when the 2008 Great Recession happened, the housing crisis, the global financial crisis, a lot of folks lost their homes in foreclosures. They were taken advantage of by some of these, adjustable rate mortgages and collateralized debt obligations, things like that, that really blew up in their faces. And a lot of times, through no fault of their own, lost their homes, lost their life savings, then lost their jobs on top of that. So Black folks historically, and this is still the case, we see it in the data that we're getting about the recession over the past couple of months, are the last people hired and the first ones fired. And that leads to a case where it's harder to build wealth. You've got fewer income earners in a family. You've got those folks who are income earners having less wealth, less liquid wealth, less opportunity, and really Black folks don't invest a lot of money in the stock market in comparison to white folks. So all those things kind of create a situation where you have a very unequal recovery from the recession. And as that recession, or as the economic recovery was starting to increase to include more Black folks, now it gets shot down by the coronavirus. We see 25 to 30 million people, maybe even 40 million people unemployed, a significant majority or a larger number of those being Black people, and it's just kind of the cycle is starting again.
So you have also reported that prematurely pulling back these stay-at-home orders could have serious consequences for the African American community. Why is that? Can you explain some of these consequences?
Well, they can have serious economic consequences for everyone. I think it hits the Black community perhaps harder than other communities because we are disproportionately more likely to be these essential emergency workers who are still having to work and endure the virus. So as more people come back to work, you've got more people likely to get the virus, more people likely to get sick, and to then have to miss out on work. Again, a lot of people don't have that savings and that safety net built up from savings and from having substantial liquid wealth. They feel like they have to go to work, they can't afford to miss work, and they're now more at risk of pushing this virus. So when you reopen the economy prematurely, if the virus is still out there, still infecting people at a high rate, if social distancing measures aren't put in place, most of the people that are going to be impacted and affected are going to be Black, or I should say a larger number of the people affected are going to be Black, simply because we are more often than not the people in those positions where we're dealing with people on the front lines, or in a position where we're dealing with people who could have the virus, who could infect us. And then a lot of Black folks just feel the need that, hey, I've got to go to work because I can't afford to take time off.
You also mentioned in your piece that middle-income families of color own significantly fewer assets than their white counterparts. Why is that, and what needs to be done for that to change?
Yeah, why is that? It dates back to the history of this country. Black folks simply weren't allowed to get some of the better paying jobs and weren't really allowed to, buy a home, to build wealth. You had the GI Bill, you had a number of efforts put in place to help all Americans in theory, but really those were only extended towards and afforded to white Americans. Black folks missed out because of redlining, because of discrimination in the banking system that we saw still existed as recently as 2007, 2008. We saw Wells Fargo was sued by the Department of Justice, a number of other banks for offering so-called ghetto loans to Black customers that they weren't offering to white customers, taking them with higher interest rates on their homes and those adjustable rate mortgages that eventually blew up in their faces. So those folks lost their homes. And again, you saw, the history of racism within banking, within the banking sector, that really kept Black folks from building a lot of wealth, that kept them from getting some of these good jobs that allow you to pass that wealth on, pass opportunity on to the children that you have, to the next generation, the children after that, to build what we now talk about as generational wealth. Black folks simply haven't had the opportunity to build that wealth. So as we push forward into this new, recession that we're in 2020, we're in very much the same position that we were. You've got some folks doing better. You've got Black billionaires. You've got more Black millionaires, more politically connected Black people on an individual level. But by and large, that generational wealth that white families were able to build in this country, Black families simply were not.
Right, and it is so important to acknowledge and underscore these systemic racist policies and issues that have led to the very kinds of inequalities that we're seeing today. Dion Rabouin for us. Dion, thank you very much for your time.
And thank you so much for having me.